Everyone laughed. That's the part that still gets me. Not the humiliation, not the failed awakening ceremony, not even the moment my name hit the bottom of every ranking board in the academy. No. What gets me is that they laughed at my dog. A tiny, white, completely unremarkable puppy sitting in my arms while the entire evaluation hall pointed and screamed. While the prodigies flexed their S-rank summons, dragons, phoenixes, celestial wolves with wings made of lightning, I stood there holding a dog that looked like it had wandered in from someone's backyard. The evaluator didn't even write anything down. He just looked at me, looked at the puppy, and said, "Next." That was the day I became a joke. The day the whole world decided I was nothing. Big mistake. Let me back up. Because you need to understand what kind of world this is before you understand what that puppy actually was. My name is Kael. I'm 17. And I live in a world where your worth is decided entirely by one thing: your summon. Not your effort, not your intelligence, not your bloodline, your summon. Whatever creature bonds to you during your awakening ceremony is what defines your entire life. S-rank summon? Welcome to the elite. A rank? You'll be fine. B and C? You're a soldier or a laborer. D and below? You don't talk about that at dinner. My family has been producing S-rank summoners for 4 generations straight. My older brother awakened a Crimson Phoenix at 16. My younger sister, 14 years old, bonded with a silver leviathan that destroyed half the ceremony hall just from its aura. And then there's me, a puppy. White. Round. Floppy ears. Tail wagging like this was the happiest moment of its entire life. The system didn't even register a rank for it. Just a blank space where the grade should have been. The evaluators assumed it was a glitch. Then, they assumed it was a joke. Then the murmuring started, and by the time I walked out of that hall, half the academy already knew. Kael Voss, son of the legendary Voss family, bonded with a no-rank mongrel. My father didn't speak to me for 3 days after that. My brother patted my shoulder and said, "Maybe you can work in the training stables." He thought he was being kind. I named the puppy Ruin. I don't know why. It just felt right. That was 6 months ago. And in those 6 months, I somehow managed to hold on to my place at Stormgate Academy on pure grades alone. Because at least my brain still worked even if my summon didn't. But grades only take you so far. Every practical class, every evaluation, every team assignment, all of it required combat-capable summons. Mine sat in my lap and chewed on my sleeve. The other students had stopped being cruel after the first month, not because they grew empathy, but because ignoring me was more efficient. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't interesting. I was furniture. Then one day, everything changed. It started with a dungeon assignment. First year practical assessment. Every student had to clear a bronze tier dungeon with their summon to pass. Simple stuff for most people. A nightmare for someone bonded to a dog with no recorded rank. I almost asked to be reassigned. I almost asked for an exemption. Instead, I walked in. The dungeon was called the Grey Labyrinth. 5 floors of mid-tier monsters, maze-like corridors, and the kind of environmental traps that punish students who rushed. Most students flew through it in under 2 hours using their summons as heavy artillery. I went in alone. Ruin trotted beside me, nose to the ground, ears perked, completely unbothered. The first monster came at me on floor 2. A stone-backed boar, basically a charging boulder with tusks. Ruin looked at it, and I remember thinking, okay, this is where we die. Ruin yawned. Then the boar stopped moving. I froze. The boar just stopped. In the middle of its charge, its legs locked, its eyes glazed over, and then, very slowly, it sat down on the dungeon floor like a well-trained house pet. I looked at Ruin. Ruin looked at me, tail wagging. I didn't understand what happened. I chalked it up to luck. A freak freezing effect from some undetected aura. I stepped around the paralyzed boar and kept moving. Floor 3, same thing. A pair of stone-fang wolves launched at us. Ruin glanced at them. They stopped mid-air, landed softly, sat down. Floor 4. A dungeon warden. Gold tier monster. Illegal for a bronze tier dungeon, but it had apparently migrated somehow, which meant the evaluators were about to have a serious problem. It roared, the ground cracked. Students above us on the surface felt the vibration and scrambled. Ruin yawned again. The dungeon warden looked at Ruin. Then it laid down. It actually laid down, rolled onto its side, and closed its eyes. I cleared the dungeon in 47 minutes. The fastest time in the history of Stormgate Academy, by a margin of 31 minutes. The evaluators thought I cheated. They reviewed the footage. They called in investigators. They ran every anomaly check possible. The dungeon cameras showed exactly what happened. Monsters attacking, Ruin looking at them, monsters stopping, over and over and over again. The official conclusion? Unknown phenomenon. Possible environmental aberration. Under review. In other words, they had no idea what Ruin was. Neither did I. But I was starting to get a feeling. That night, back in my dorm, I sat on the floor with Ruin in my lap and just watched him. He looked back at me with big, dark, completely calm eyes. That calm was the thing. That absolute, total, bottomless calm. Like nothing in the world could ever be a threat to him. Like the idea of danger had never occurred to him and never would. I opened the Academy's Summon Registry app on my scroll tablet, the one that lets students check the ratings and classifications of known summons. I typed in everything I'd observed. No rank. Behavioral control aura. No mana signature. Passive activation only. The registry returned one match. 1. A classification that hadn't been recorded in 200 years. A classification so rare that most current professors had never encountered one, only read about them in theoretical texts. Domain Sovereign class. I read the entry 3 times because I didn't believe it the first 2. Domain Sovereigns weren't just strong summons. They existed in a completely different category from the standard rank system, which is why the evaluation ceremony hadn't registered a rank. The ranking system literally didn't have a box for what Ruin was. They weren't measured in conventional power levels because their ability wasn't power in the traditional sense. Domain Sovereigns controlled spaces. They didn't fight, they didn't attack, they didn't even need to react. Within a certain radius of their presence, they held absolute authority over every creature, every living thing, every conscious mind that entered their domain. Authority wasn't the right word. Ownership was closer. Everything in their domain became theirs. Not enslaved, not controlled, just belonged. Willingly, instinctively, completely. Animals submitted, monsters bowed, and as the domain sovereign grew, as its power matured, that radius expanded. That depth of authority deepened. The entry described what a fully matured domain sovereign was capable of. I closed the app and stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Ruin was gnawing on my boot. The thing was, none of this changed anything yet, because Ruin's domain was still tiny. Maybe a 10-meter radius at best, judging by what I'd seen in the dungeon. Which meant outside that 10 meters, he was still just a puppy with no recorded rank. Still invisible to the Academy's power hierarchy. Still the thing people laughed at, which meant I was still Kael Voss, the joke. I could reveal it. I could march up to the summon classification board and demand a reevaluation. Probably should have, honestly. But I thought about it for maybe 3 seconds before deciding no. Because here's the thing. The moment people knew what Ruin was, they'd come for him. Other summoners, collectors, noble families with resources and lawyers and private security forces who specialized in reacquiring rare assets. A 200-year extinct classification would have powerful people moving before I finished the sentence, so I kept my mouth shut. I went back to being furniture, but quietly, I started testing. Every morning before class, out in the back training fields when no one was watching, I walked with ruin, and I paid attention to the radius, measured it carefully, watched what happened when we approached training dummies, when sparring partners walked nearby, when feral practice summons in the containment field caught ruin's gaze. The radius was growing, slowly, but definitely growing. 2 weeks after the dungeon, it was 15 meters. 3 weeks, 20. By the end of the first month post-dungeon, it had stretched to 35 meters, and something else was changing too. The depth of the authority was shifting. In the dungeon, monsters had just stopped, sat, went passive. But now, in the training field, watching a practice summon enter the radius, I watched something different happen. The summon didn't just stop, it walked to ruin, slowly, gently, and it bowed. Not the head lowering, I detect danger bow, the full chest to ground, I acknowledge my king bow. I had to sit down for a moment after that one. 3 months in, the academy started noticing things were weird around me, even if they didn't understand why. Stray animals followed me across campus. The aggressive training summons in the containment pens went quiet when I walked past. The wild beast that had escaped from the Summoner's Zoo incident, an Iron Mane lion that had taken a team of A-rank students 3 hours to recapture, walked up to ruin and pressed its forehead to the ground. The A-rank students watched from a distance, unable to explain what they were seeing. That was the first crack in the wall. People stopped fully ignoring me, started watching from corners, started asking quiet questions about what the new rumor about the Voss failure might mean. Then came the intercohort tournament. Every year, the Academy's 3 cohorts, first, second, and third years, competed in a massive round-robin battle event, 1 representative per pair of students. S-rank summons dominating the rankings, as always. The tournament was mostly irrelevant to first years, since everyone assumed the top 3 spots would go to older students with more developed summons. I was assigned a first-year slot as a formality. No one expected anything. My first match was against Lars Cade. Second year, B-rank summon, solid fighter, known for being ruthless in sparring. He walked into the arena looking bored. He saw ruin and visibly relaxed. "You actually entered this?" he said, not cruelly, just confused, like he'd expected a human walking a literal houseplant. "I actually entered this," I confirmed. The match started. Lars called his summon, a large-scaled thornback lizard, B-rank, mean-looking, and fast. It charged. Ruin sat. The lizard made it about 12 meters into the arena before it slowed. 10 meters, it stumbled. 8 meters from ruin, it stopped completely. Then it sat. Lars stared. What did you do to Mex?" His lizard was sitting in the arena dust, tail swishing lazily. Watching ruin like ruin was the most interesting thing it had ever seen. Lars was shouting commands. Mex wasn't listening. Mex had already decided who to listen to. The referee gave it 30 seconds, then called the match. Kael Voss, first year, summon unranked, winner. The arena was dead silent for about 4 full seconds. Then it erupted. Not in applause, in confusion, shouted questions, people turning to neighbors, the kind of noise that happens when something breaks a model that everyone was using to understand the world. Lars stood in the arena for a moment, looking at his lizard, then at me, then back at his lizard. Then he walked out without a word. My second match was against a third year. A student named Soren Vale, top of the rankings, bonded to an A-rank Storm Falcon that had never lost a match. Soren was the kind of student who had a following. People who attended matches just to watch him win, who collected footage of his fights, who had already started circulating his name to guild scouts. He looked at me across the arena and smiled. Not cruelly, politely, like he was about to do me a favor by ending this quickly and painlessly. "Your summon's radius is larger than it appears," he said quietly, so only I could hear. 40 meters, I estimate. Maybe 45. I looked at him. He shrugged. "I've been paying attention." The match started. Soren Storm Falcon launched immediately, high into the arena ceiling, circling fast and wide, staying outside what he'd calculated as my radius. Smart, very smart. He wasn't trying to win with brute force. He was trying to keep his summon beyond Ruin's reach and use the Falcon's range attacks. Problem was, his estimate was off. The radius was 52 meters now. The Storm Falcon completed its first wide arc, pulling just inside 50 meters on the turn, and it hesitated just a fraction, a microsecond of the wings stuttering. Soren felt it immediately and called a retreat, pulling the Falcon wider. But Ruin had already seen it. And I genuinely think, that was the first moment Ruin decided to actively reach, because the Falcon froze mid-flight. Not from Ruin's passive aura. This was different. I felt it differently. Like a hand extending instead of a field existing. Like attention instead of presence. The Falcon hung in the air for a moment, wings still, then slowly descended. It landed in the arena, walked to Ruin, pressed its beak to the ground. Soren's face went very still. The arena was dead silent again. The referee called the match. Soren walked to me afterward, and he didn't look angry. He looked like a mathematician who had just been shown that 2 + 2 = 17, and was trying to figure out how to rebuild his understanding of numbers from scratch. "What is it?" he asked. I looked at him. Smart, observant, clearly not the type to go spreading rumors to cause damage. In fact, looking at his face, I had a weird feeling that Soren Vale was exactly the kind of person I did not want as an enemy. "I'll tell you when I figure it out myself," I said. He nodded, like that was completely fair. I made it to the semifinals before the Academy administration stopped the tournament. Not officially because of me. Officially because of unexplained interference with bonded summons during competitive matches. 3 referees had filed concern reports. 2 professors who'd been watching had submitted requests for a formal investigation into possible illegal ability use. But what actually happened was simpler. The second-year cohort representative, a student named Mira Stell, a S-rank bonded summon, a Void Panther that had reportedly never so much as flinched at anything, refused to enter the arena. Not because of a rule, not because of injury, not because of fear, exactly. Her Void Panther had walked to the arena entrance, seen Ruin sitting at the far end, and simply laid down and refused to move. No matter what Mira commanded, no matter what commands or mana she pushed, the Panther was not responding to her anymore. The Void Panther was listening to Ruin. Mira was furious. Mira's family, who had paid significantly for that Panther's bond contract and training regimen, was going to be significantly more furious. The administration was in emergency session by nightfall. I sat in my dorm with Ruin in my lap, waiting for the knock on my door. It came at 2 a.m. Not the administration, though. My father. He stood in the doorway of my dorm, looking like a man trying to solve a problem that kept multiplying every time he thought he'd contained it. He was in traveling clothes, which meant he'd come from the estate, which meant someone had called him directly, rather than going through normal channels. He looked at Ruin for a long time. Ruin looked back. My father was a powerful summoner, one of the most accomplished of his generation, and I watched something happen in his face that I had never seen before. He looked uncertain. "What is that?" he said. Not a question. Almost like he was talking to himself. "His name is Ruin," I said. My father stepped into the room slowly. Ruin watched him. Not aggressively, not passively, alertly, like he was deciding something. Then Ruin's tail wagged, and my father, the head of the Voss family, a man I had never seen so much as bow to a king, very slowly sat down on the floor. Not because he wanted to, because his legs just stopped working the way they were supposed to. Because the moment he entered the room, he had entered the domain, and in the domain, There was only one authority. He sat there on the floor of my dorm room, looking absolutely stunned. "Dad," I said. He looked up at me from the floor. "I think," I said carefully, "we need to have a different kind of conversation." The conversation took 3 hours. My father sat on the floor the entire time, Ruin's domain keeping him anchored there, which honestly made the whole discussion significantly more productive than any conversation we'd had in the previous 6 months. I told him everything: the dungeon, the measurements, the tournament, the Void Panther, all of it. He was quiet for a long time after. "Domain sovereign," he finally said. "Domain sovereign," I confirmed. Another long silence. "The last recorded one was in the era of the Founding Wars," he said. "It ended a conflict that had lasted 40 years, in 6 days. "I know," I said. "I read the entry." He looked at Ruin again. Ruin was asleep on my pillow, snoring softly. "He's going to grow," my father said quietly. "He's been growing every week," I said, "and it's accelerating." My father closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had shifted in them that I had never seen before. Not fear exactly, not respect exactly. Something between the two that didn't have a clean name. "They're going to come for him," he said, "once it becomes known. Noble houses, the Summoners Council, the military guilds, everyone who understands what a domain sovereign becomes at full maturity." "I know," I said. "What do you want to do?" I looked at Ruin sleeping on my pillow. Round, white, ridiculous. Looking for all the world like a completely ordinary puppy. "Keep going," I said. "Keep growing. Stay under the radar as long as possible. And when we can't anymore," I looked at my father, "then we don't hide." He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Once, slowly. The way powerful men nod when they've decided to follow someone else's lead. He left before dawn. 3 things happened the next morning. First, the Academy formally suspended my tournament participation pending investigation, which everyone expected. Second, Soren Vale found me in the library and sat across from me without asking permission and said, "I want to be on your side when this breaks open." Just like that. Simple, calm, like he'd already done the math. I looked at him. "You don't know what you're asking," I said. "I know exactly what I'm asking," he said. "I've seen Domain Sovereign records, historical archives. I've been looking since the tournament." He met my eyes. The last summoner bonded to a Domain Sovereign didn't just change the war. He changed the world order. Everything after him was built on the foundation he created. A pause? "I want to be there when that happens again." I said nothing for a moment. Then, "You understand it could also get us both killed." "Yes," he said. I looked at him. Smart, calm, not remotely intimidated. The exact profile of someone you absolutely want in your corner. "Fine," I said. Third thing that happened that morning. A messenger arrived from the Summoners Council. Not a letter, a person. In formal council attire, carrying a sealed summons document, standing at the Academy gates and asking specifically for me by name. The council had become aware of the tournament incident. They were officially requesting, which in council language means demanding, that I present myself and my summon for evaluation and classification within 7 days. I read the document twice. 7 days. I looked at Ruin sitting beside my feet. Ruin looked up at me. His tail wagged. Then, without any change in expression or posture, every bird in the trees surrounding the Academy courtyard went silent at once. Every stray cat and dog on the grounds turned to look in our direction. 3 bonded summons in the adjacent training building made sounds their owners had never heard them make before. And the council messenger, a trained, experienced professional who had no idea what was happening, took 3 involuntary steps backward. 7 days. I had 7 days before the Summoners Council came for us. 7 days before every major power in the country had a formal file on what Ruin was. 7 days before the door that I'd been quietly cracking open for 6 months got kicked off its hinges. I folded the document and put it in my pocket. 7 days, I told Soren, who had walked up beside me and read over my shoulder. He nodded slowly. What do we do? I looked at Ruin. His domain had hit 60 meters that morning. The acceleration was real, and it wasn't stopping. The Summoners Council thought they were calling me in for a classification check. They had no idea they were about to walk a domain sovereign through their front door. We go, I said. Soren looked at me. We go, we walk in, we let them see exactly what he is. I met his eyes. And we make absolutely sure they understand, before they get any ideas about taking him, what happens to anyone who tries. A pause. Then Soren smiled. Not cruelly, not nervously. The focused, clean smile of someone who has decided where they're standing. They have no idea what's coming, he said. No, I agreed. Ruin sneezed. And somewhere in the academy behind us, I heard a chain snap in the monster containment unit. Then another. Then a third. Not because the monsters were breaking free, because they were trying to get closer. The radius had just hit 70 meters. We had 7 days. And something told me we weren't going to need all of them.